Well, hi everyone, Corey Barker here with a new tutorial as promised yesterday. If you were following me at all, you know that I was on my Instagram, really trying to make a really proactive effort to get back on Instagram and do it more consistently. But I told everyone that if I got 100 follows throughout the day, that I would do a free tutorial today. Well, the response was overwhelming. I got more than 120 follows over the course of the day, and I want to thank you guys for that. Keep the follows coming. And I'm going to be doing a lot more stuff here in the future, not just on my Instagram, but on my Facebook page, as well as a lot of great things coming to Kelby One, things like the Creativity Lab, which you're going to find out more as the time goes on. But here we want to talk about 3D in Photoshop. Now, I wanted to talk about an aspect of 3D that you may or may not be aware of. Now, we know that you can create 3D objects and you can light objects in Photoshop with certain types of 3D lights like infinite lights and spotlights and things like that. What you probably don't know is that an object can actually emit light itself. You can actually tell Photoshop to have a mesh actually illuminate an object in a 3D scene. So we're going to do that in a very interesting way. We're going to recreate a sign. It's actually the sign I saw at a restaurant. It was this kind of stone wall, and then they had the name of the restaurant kind of offset of the wall, and then there were lights behind it actually illuminating on the wall. And I thought that would be a really interesting way to demonstrate how you can make objects give off light in 3D. So we're going to start with by first creating the actual stone wall. Now I have here a stock image of this stone wall that we're going to use here. And it is only a square of the stone wall, so we're actually going to have to do a little bit of Photoshop magic to make it work. Now, I've gone ahead and dragged and dropped it over into my working document here, and I'm going to put it in free transform by pressing Command or Control T, and then Command 0. And that's going to reveal the transform box, as you can see right here. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key and the Option key so it'll scale proportionately. And let's just get it to fit right in there. I'm going to push it over here to the side, and we'll press Enter. And there is part of my stone wall. So now I'm going to hold down the Option key again, just the Option key, and you'll see that I get a double arrow. And that's going to allow me to create and drag a duplicate of that layer. Now I'm also going to add the Shift key and then click and drag to the right, and that's going to drag a duplicate right on over. Now I'm going to leave that to where it overlaps a little bit, as you can see right there, because I'm going to put a layer mask on that layer. And let's jump over here and grab my gradient tool. I'm going to use a linear gradient. Black is my foreground color. I'm just going to go over here and just give this a little bit of a gradient just to give it a smooth transition between those two elements there. In fact, let's make it a little bit smaller gradient. Let's do like that. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to do it again. I'm going to Option Shift drag over another duplicate, and we'll position it right there, and that completes the whole wall. Now in the layers panel, you can see that this element is broken up into 3 different layers. So I'm going to go and select all 3 layers and simply press Command E to merge them down to a single layer. There we go. Now I want to make this wall a little bit darker. The original color here is a little bright, or the original image is a little bright. So I'm going to go ahead and make a duplicate of that layer by simply pressing Command or Control J. And then I'm going to change the blend mode of this layer to multiply, and it's going to make it a lot darker. Now I'm going to merge this back down to a single layer by pressing Command E again, and you can see now we've got the darker layer. However, the colors are a tad more saturated than I'd probably like them to be. So I'm just going to use the Hue Saturation tool. I'm just going to press Command or Control U to bring up Hue Saturation dialog here, and in the saturation setting, I'm simply going to bring that to about -15. And you can see it reduces the amount of saturation in those colors there. There we go. Okay. So now the wall is created. Now we're ready to go ahead and start adding or putting it in the 3D environment. So I'm going to go into the 3D menu, and I go over here to New Mesh from Layer and choose Postcard, because I don't need to create a full volume 3D object. I just need to put this in 3-dimensional space. So a postcard is going to do that just fine. And what it does is it takes that flat 2-dimensional layer and puts it in 3-dimensional space. So you can see I move it around. You can still see it's a flat layer. It has no dimension to it, but it is in a 3-dimensional space now. We can move it around as such. So let's go ahead and open up the 3D panel and the Properties panel. We're going to need both of those to edit our 3D object here. So we're going to adjust the lighting on this object before we introduce the text element of this design. So the first thing is, let's jump up to the environment property here. at the very top of the 3D panel. Now, when you do that, I'm going to jump over to the Properties panel, and you'll notice at the top there is this image-based light, or IBL, right here. Now, the image-based light is whatever is bright in the image is going to be the brightest on the object. So you can see the image-based light right now is solid white, which is illuminating the object 100%. If I turn that off, it's like turning the lights out on this image. So we're going to adjust that. I'm actually going to go in here into this new folder icon and choose New Texture. Now, image-based lights do not need to be large documents. In fact, I'm only going to make this 1,000 by 1,000 pixels. Now, all that did was create the new document. We need to go back to that menu and this time choose Edit Texture. So there's our document filled with white. And what we're going to do now is basically invert the colors. I'm simply going to press Command or Control I, and that's going to make the background black. Now, I'm going to go ahead and create a new blank layer, and we're going to introduce a simple radial gradient in this image. So I'm going to go ahead and get my gradient tool like I did before, but this time we're going to do a radial gradient. And I'm going to use the foreground to transparent gradient right here, the second one. And I'm just going to go ahead and just draw a small gradient like this. That's all there is to it. Now I'm going to go into the Layers panel. I don't need this to be at full intensity like it is, so I'm actually going to drop this to more like 45%. And that's all there is to it. So I'm going to close that and save the changes. And now you can see it looks like it's all dark on our image there, but you notice this little orb in the middle? This allows us to use the 3D tools while we're in here and move that image-based light around. And as I do that, you can see that the gradient illuminates as it passes over on that object. Now, I know it's very, very dim right now, but it's going to be fine in just a moment. So let's move on and add a couple more lights to this scene here. So I'm going to go into the lights section of my 3D panel, and you see that we have the just the environment property right now. But I'm going to go down here to the New Lights menu and choose a new spotlight. And it's going to go ahead and add that element in there. You can see the wireframe on it. I'm just going to use my 3D tools up here in the options bar. I'm going to grab the third one over, which is the slide tool. It allows me to push the lights back and forth in three-dimensional space. I'm actually going to bring it forward a little bit. And let's push it up a little bit as well. Maybe rotate it down just a hair. And I'm also going to go down here to the intensity in the properties panel right here and drop this to about 30%. So again, it looks very, very dim. The light, most of the light in this scene is going to come from the object or the text itself, which you'll see in just a moment. But we just want to add some very subtle lighting to the scene as it is. Now, the next thing is I'm going to add a second spotlight to this. And let's put this on the other side here, and we'll just rotate this around and just drag this out so it lights up the wall there. Again, I'm going to bring that intensity down to about 30%. Just like that. Okay. So now if I go back to that image-based light and move that around, you can see how it gets more intense or less intense with wherever it's positioned. Now, if you really want to get an idea of how bright the scene might be, you can do a quick render on this by going to the 3D menu and going down here and choosing render right here at the bottom. And it will start to do a render, and you can see the scene is fairly evenly lit. That's fine. I'm actually going to drop the intensity of that image-based light to about 60% for now. And we can always change that later on. All right. Now, one more thing I want to do. Or actually, no, we're ready to go ahead and do our text here. So I'm actually going to go ahead and bring my text layer forward. And you can see it's just the Kelby 1 Creativity Lab coming soon. But what I want to do is go ahead and make this text into a 3D object. So with the text layer selected, we're going to go to 3D and go down here to New 3D Extrusion from Selected Layer. And it goes ahead and extrudes the text. And if I go and move my camera, which is the current view in the 3D panel here, I can actually rotate this around and you can see that the text is extruded. In fact, let me turn the background off just so you can see better what's going on here. So we can see the text has got a fairly deep extrusion there. So I'm going to go ahead and select the text object here in the 3D panel. And that will show you in the Properties panel the extrusion depth right here. And that's really, really a lot. So let's bring that down to more like 200. There we go. So now you can see the text is not so thick, and it's nicely in in 3D. Now, turn that layer back on, and I'm going to go ahead and bring this back to the default front view there. There we go. Now, in order for this to interact with the stone wall behind it, they both need to be on the same 3D layer. Right now, we have two different 3D layers in this document, but I need them to interact with each other. So we need to merge them together. Now, merging 3D layers is different than merging two regular layers in Photoshop, whereas when you merge two regular layers, the pixels all merge together and you can no longer do anything with it. When you merge 3D layers, you can still edit the individual 3D objects through the 3D and Properties panel. So I'm going to go ahead and press Command E, and it's going to merge that text down to that layer. And if I go ahead and move my current view, now it moves all one object, and you can see the text is there right on that wall. So now I'm going to select the text object itself. Notice it's content sensitive. As I click on it, it'll select that object. And I'm going to move my cursor over this little axis widget right here, and this blue arrow is the Z-axis, and actually if I click and drag down, it brings the text forward. Clicking and dragging up actually pushes it back in space and all the way behind the stone wall there. But we actually want to bring it forward where it's kind of floating off of the wall there. And you can see that by going and grabbing that current view again and just rotating this around and seeing how much, see there's a little bit of a gap between the text and the wall there, which is great. So I'm actually going to, let's bring that back to the front. So I'm going to go ahead and bring this, actually no, let's bring that current view around again. Because what I want to do is actually modify the back of this text. So I'm actually going to slide it forward so we can see the back here. So now in the 3D panel, what I want to do is add a bevel to the back face of this text here. So with the Kelby 1 text object selected, you notice we've got the master layer here, and then we've got the different materials beneath it. You can twirl that down and see the Kelby 1 3D text layer. So with that main layer selected, go over to the Properties panel, and there is the Cap section, which is this third tab at the top here. Now we're going to go into the menu here and choose the back instead of the front. And we're going to add a bevel of about, well, we'll do about 30 on that back face there. The angle I'm going to drop to around 20. Now it's hard to see because it's in shadow here, but what we're going to do is, in that 3D panel over here, we are now going to go into look for the Kelby 1 Creativity Lab back bevel material. So go ahead and highlight that. And you can see it's kind of highlighted here in the image preview there. Now what we have here in the Properties panel are the various surface properties that allow you to modify how the surface of the object behaves in light and how it reflects and casts shadows and all that different types of things. What we want to look at here is up here you have the diffuse, specular, and all these different properties. What we want to look at is the illumination property right here. By default, it's set to black, so I'm going to go ahead and click on that and just change the color to white. Now you'll notice the bevel now changes color. Now it looks like it's just a white color on there. It's actually emitting light, and you can actually increase the intensity of how much light it emits by boosting this intensity slider. And I'm going to do it to about 2.5 stops here. Something like that. And that's all there is to it. So I'm going to click OK. So our light is created and our object is now ready to give off light. So I'm actually going to go ahead and select that text object once more. And let's just slide it back closer to the wall there. We don't want it to go through the wall, as you see right there. And we'll just position it right about there. And then once again, I'm going to go ahead and hit my default camera. Where did it go? There it is. And bring it back to the front-facing view here. Now, I'm just going to do a quick render and just see where we're at with everything. So I'm just going to do a render here, and let's just see what the light does on the background. Now, you can see the light is generating some intensity on the back. It looks really speckly right now. Now, I've had a lot of people ask me about this when they do a render. It looks very spotty and speckly like that. That is normal. It's just going to need to, it's doing a lot of, there's a very soft area of this. The light has a nice fade to it, so it tends to render it very, very rough at first and gets more fine and more fine as that with each pass of the render there. So just don't get nervous when you see all that speckly on there. And this is actually looking pretty good. So I'm going to actually go and just make a few more adjustments here. I'm actually going to slide this text a little bit more forward so there's more light being shown on there. And also, let's go back to those lights. Remember those spotlights we created earlier? We got spotlight 1 and 2. What I want to do is go in here, and you'll notice that the shadows have very harsh edges on these, on the text right here on the object. Well, that has to do with the softness setting here, which is at 0, so there's no settings applied to that yet. So I'm going to set that to 50 on both spotlights. We'll set the softness to 50. And even on the image-based light, which is, again, very subtle, but we'll put that one at 25. So set the softness of both spotlights to 50, and then the environment image-based light to 25 right there. And I'm going to select the background wall here, which is that layer 1, copy 2 there. Now, I'm going to, on a postcard object, you'll notice the ambient light here is by default set to white. Let's go ahead and make that a little bit darker. And I'm going to boost the reflection here a little bit on that back wall, just so it'll pick up the light a little bit better. And that looks pretty good. Now I'm going to go back to my text, and I'm going to select that front inflation, which is the front face of that text on there. And I'm just going to boost the reflection and shine on that just a little bit so it picks up some of that spotlight on there. Not too much, though. And then I'm also going to go ahead and add a little bit of reflection and shine to the sides, the extrusion material. I want to be able to pick up maybe some of that brick wall and everything, and maybe reflect some of the light on there. So I'm just going to, again, boost that shine and reflection just a little bit. Now I'm also going to go back and reselect the original or the main text layer here in the 3D panel, because I want to go back to that cap section, that tab up here at the top, and we modified the bevel for the back of the text here. But I'm going to go back into this menu and select the front, and just give the front of the text a little bit of a bevel there, about 5. I'm going to go and leave the angle at 45 degrees as well. Now that we've added that little bit of a bevel to the front of the text, I'm going to go and select that front bevel material right up here, and then just boost the reflection and shine on that a little bit so it'll pick up some of the light from the image-based light and even the spotlights as well. So notice how it's doing that right there. So let's go ahead and just perhaps reposition our spotlights here a little bit, so it will illuminate the scene a little bit more so we can see the text. So you'll see that the light's very subtle, it's not very bright, and that's because we want the light to mainly come from that background element. So let's do another render and see what we've got here. So let's go down here and do render. And again, it's going to start out very speckly and very spotty on that. And so now you can see that light is really shining on there, and it's a little bit too much reflecting on that background. So let's actually go ahead and bring that down. That's clearly going to be too much shine on that. Let's just get the reflection just a little bit. And let's go ahead and try that again. And again, this is the thing about 3D, is that once you get the elements in place, then it's just a matter of tweaking these settings to finally get the look that you're going for. And I think that looks like it's going to work pretty well. So again, there's that really speckly element of the render. But what I'm going to do now is just go ahead and jump ahead to the finished look so you can actually see what it looks like when the render is done. So let's have a look at that. All right, so as you can see here, I've gone ahead and done the render, and you can see now how much clearer the light is. It actually looks a little bit more like it's realistic, like the light is illuminating from behind the object. But again, this is light coming from the actual mesh itself. It's not a light like the spotlight or anything like that. It's actually being emitted from the back of the object. So it's a really cool way of adding light to a scene. You can actually create custom shaped lights, or actually have things like this where you're illuminating from behind like that. But you got all kinds of really cool things you can do just by applying an illumination to the mesh of an object. Now, obviously, I have to adjust things like the reflection on the back wall here. It's a little bit too reflective for a stone wall like that, so I'd have to adjust that and redo the render, of course. But hopefully this gives you a good idea of what you can do, not just with the lights that are there, the obvious lights like the spotlights, but what you can do with objects and illuminating objects as well. Now, as you've seen throughout this tutorial, this does say the Kelby 1 Creativity Lab, and that is kind of a subtle little teaser for something that we've got that I've been developing for the Kelby One site. So if you're a Kelby One subscriber, we're going to be adding this new dimension of the Kelby One site where it's called the Creativity Lab, where we do all kinds of really fun, creative stuff. It's going to be where a lot of things like the 3D and retouching and compositing, we're going to be doing all kinds of really, really cool stuff in the Creativity Lab. We're hopefully going to have that up and running in the next couple weeks. So if you are a Kelby One subscriber, be sure to be on the lookout for that. We've got a lot of really, really cool stuff coming down the pipeline. So we'll see you guys soon. Take care, and we'll talk to you later.